After nourishment, shelter, and companionship, stories are the thing we need most in the world. Philip Pullman. Merry meet. I'm Cassandra Byrnes. As a priestess, author, and dominatrix, I'm here to guide you on a journey of self-discovery and empowerment. Together, we'll create a safe space to explore your deepest desires and embrace your true self. Let's journey together into the depths of what makes you feel truly alive. Hello. Today I'm recording the first in a series of rather off-the-cuff videos talking about how writing and reading, sensuality, sexuality, and kink inform my journey as a priestess, and how I've melded all those things together to create a special magic all my own. So today I'm going to talk about the power of words. I don't remember an awful lot of my childhood. Thank you, complex trauma. However, I do remember how much it meant to me to read from as early as I can remember. Learning to read and write in my memories seem absolutely effortless. I'm sure that was not the case, but they really felt natural to me. And in the second grade, I wrote my very first poem, and my teacher and my mom went crazy. And so that was the beginning, as a Leo, to receive so much acclaim for something that I've created out of my own brain was truly empowering. And not long after that, I started keeping a journal. When I was 9, I started writing stories. I don't remember exactly when. And I read constantly in a time when, I watched a lot of TV too, I'll be honest, and there are stories there too. However, I didn't have a phone. I didn't have a tablet. Books were my touchstone as a person who didn't have much of a social life and too many friends to speak of. Books were absolutely my friends. One of my most influential books from when I was young was the Madeleine Wrinkle in Time series. I could really identify with the main character who felt like she didn't really fit in. Her wild world. I revisited that book more recently after I had been down my path of priestesshood and getting to know my spirit guides. And I just cried my eyes out in this one spot where she met one of the alien characters, and I realized how deeply that had affected me even then, and how I'd carried it with me even though I didn't remember the specifics of the book. I also really loved the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. That was a big one for me. I was pretty young when I first read the Tolkien series, The Lord of the Rings. Those worlds meant so much to me, but it was more than that. Because even in fantasy worlds and these outlandish things that were happening, I could understand how these characters felt many times. And I could realize that I'm not the only person feeling this way. It made me feel less alone. And that's something that I really strive to do in my own writing. For example, with my first published novel, I really wanted to explore how it feels to be a polyamorous pansexual person and how difficult that can be to accept when you grew up in a mononormative world. And so I wanted other people to be able to see themselves in that. Books also informed my spiritual path long before I knew what it was called, so to speak, I discovered the Marion Zimmer Bradley book, The Myths of Avalon. And that book, I mean, the story of the King Arthur legend had been something that I had immersed myself in quite a bit before I discovered that book. And when I found it told from the point of view of the women in the story, and also women who were devoted to the goddess, and I realized that was a thing, it was all about the same time that I was discovering Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, and how the goddess had figured so prominently in the ancient people's belief systems. It resonated with me hard. It resonated with me because I was beginning to come into my sexuality, and it was something that even in my progressive church that I grew up in, it was not okay. It was not okay in many of the circles that I ran in, and I knew in my heart that it was okay somehow. And so books helped me come to grips with that as well, in an environment that was not particularly supportive of my own search for pleasure and my sexual identity at that time. And I am so grateful now that young people coming up have the internet and can, and a lot more open-minded people in their lives, hopefully, in many places, in many cases. But yeah, the library for me was where I found a lot of the answers that I've been searching for, because what people were telling me was not adding up. And so journaling was something that was really meaningful to me growing up. I wanted, when I was a grown-up, I wanted to be able to remember what it felt like, because it seemed like my parents didn't remember. And I knew one day I was going to have a daughter, and I did not want to forget what it felt like to have those big emotions of being a child, of being an adolescent, of having a crush, of all the things. And what's interesting is I didn't forget. It was almost as if the act of journaling those things and acknowledging it in the moment really created those paths to where I might not remember a lot of details from growing up, but I do remember how I felt. And I do remember that the world felt like it was ending over things that, don't seem important to adults. And I tried to carry that into my parenting as best I could. So now journaling has become a spiritual practice. It takes on many forms. Sometimes I dig into my subconscious beliefs. Sometimes I just barf out all the negative thoughts I'm having so that they don't sit with me in my head all day. I do try to make sure every morning I write a little something. On a good day, I try to do 3 pages from the Artist Way recommendation. Although she said, don't look at the pages and put them in an envelope and all that. But I just keep mine in my journals, which I have copiously labeled and collected. And sometimes I do refer back to them. It wouldn't matter if I didn't, though, because that practice is part of the integration process of all the work that I'm doing on myself. And it's just super important. And it helps me still draw parallels between what I'm going through and what other people might be going through, to find compassion, to be more clear about what my story is. But not just writing, any kind of storytelling, like to be able to share what we went through and be witnessed is one of the most powerful things I've ever seen, that I encountered when I started attending women's circles and other ceremonies about 7 or 8 years ago. Being witnessed in our stories is one of the most powerful things that we can do for our souls, for our spirits, for our subconscious to be made conscious. And also being able to identify archetypes. I loved myths growing up, no surprise there. So when I started, delving into the witchcraft books and learning how to embody the characteristics of these gods and goddesses that I had come to learn about and love, it was really powerful medicine. And it's fun to consider these characters, these deities, these energy beings, and the qualities that they have and how they relate to those qualities in ourselves, or lack thereof, or if we think there's a lack thereof. How can I be more sexy like Aphrodite? Or how can I embrace my wisdom like Athena, just for example. I don't consider myself a religious person at all. I did for a while practice and priestess in a Wiccan way, and I found that it eventually had dogma, just like a lot of other religions. So my choice was to identify myself as a witch, as a spiritual person, and not with any particular religious sect. And so just so you know about that. I was led through Wicca into the sort of witchcraft that I practice now, which is, it took a little while to think about it, because really where my power is that I walk between the worlds. I make connections with those archetypes and those myths and see how they can help people. And so the best definition I came up with was a hedge witch, which was like in Europe when, these witches would live on the edge where the hedge separated the town from like the wilds, and people would seek her out when they needed healing. And so I do feel that I feel a real connection with that sort of hedge idea, and which is why a lot of what I wrote for a long time was the kind of fiction where magic, there's sort of a little screen, a little barrier between like the real world, the one that we live in, the one that we experience day to day, and this magical realm that where all these things are happening and most people have no idea. I mean, that is how I experience the world, and that is one of the things that I like to write about. However, I realized that in all the writings that I did, I liked writing the spicy scenes the most, like the sensuality, the sexuality. Like that was such an important part of what I like to write. I mean, even in in high school, I guess it would still be considered fan fiction. We wrote books and books of this fan fiction about the rock stars that we liked, and boy, they got spicy. So we would pass those around. Teacher ever got a hold of them, I'm sure their eyes probably popped out of their heads. And another author that truly influenced me in my life was Anne Rice, because she was so powerful at creating that sensual experience of every single thing that you could possibly experience. And to me, that's how I want to live my life. That's how, I just want to be able to experience like every sip of this coffee or every breath of this summer air, or in all the ways, with all the senses. And so that was a big piece of inspiration that I found from writing as well. And of course, that's also found in poetry, which I did enjoy consuming poetry as well. Which, anyways, all of that led me to romance. For the longest time, I was a literary snob, so to speak. I didn't understand about romance and where its place was and how it was actually right? You know, like, I don't want to say it now because it's so terrible, but I realized the error of my ways. But yeah, I was a little judgy about romance novels, and some of that may have come from not really feeling like I fit into the typical stereotypical idea of what a romance was like, what it was about, the soulmate, the monogamy, a lot of that stuff was didn't really resonate with me. But those were also preconceived notions about what those books may have been about. I don't know. I didn't read them at the time. It wasn't until a few years ago, with the internet and the wonders of Kindle Unlimited, that I realized that people were writing about all kinds of wild, taboo things, and people were eating it up. And it wasn't a lesser form of writing or communication. It was a way for us to experience our fantasies and desires, and also, again, realize that we're not alone in them. Not only are people writing about this, but people are buying these books. So people want to know about this stuff. People want to experience this stuff. Some pretty, the romance genre gets pretty dark. It gets pretty fantastical. It gets pretty wild. It's not all about boy meets girl. And so that led me to start seeking out reader groups and start writing romance. Like, finally confess to myself that this exploration of relationships and sexuality and sensuality is exactly my wheelhouse, and I should feel free and not judge myself for wanting to explore those things. So when I found the reader groups, I realized that it was just another place, just like Women's Circle, just like Ceremony, where people could be honest and open and seen and witness in their wildest fantasies, and how freeing that was. And how empowering it was in day-to-day life, being able to know that you're not alone in these wild fantasies that you're having can make a huge difference. And it's not just, it is absolutely self-care. It is fun and games, and it is also deeper than that. It can really influence the way you walk in the world to be accepted for who you are and your wild and crazy fantasies. And so that pretty much encapsulates the relationships that I've found between reading, writing, and how that plays into my role as priestess. Because as a priestess, I desire to be a sacred mirror for others to see themselves as absolutely amazing, beautiful, wild human beings who have fantasies that may not meet societal expectations. I'm not sure if that's entirely the right word, but they may be taboo. They may not resonate with what we're told is acceptable. And guess what? It's perfectly fine. Let's celebrate that. Let's absolutely hold space for that, because the power of letting people be who they are and letting people have their fantasies and be celebrated for them goes way, way beyond the moment. It really goes deep into spirituality and psychology. And so I think that about covers it. Thank you so much for being with me here today. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free. You'll find information in the description box, how to follow me on social media. If you'd like a private session, you can reach out to me on any of those platforms. We can talk a little bit about your taboo desires if you like. So have a magical day. Until next time, be wild, keep shining, and stay magical.